All right, this is a fall semester 2020, the Southern Kingdom, looking at the divided kingdom of Israel. Remember, they divided after Solomon. His son Rehoboam became the first king of the south, and so we've been looking at the different kings here. Now we have Jotham, who was the 11th ruler of the south. Not technically the 11th king, but the 11th ruler, because one of the rulers was Athaliah, queen. And as before him, we see that a lot of these kings here co-reigned with their father. Jotham co-reigned with his father and his son. Because Israel was, of course, we're talking about the southern kingdom here, so it's not as big a property as the northern kingdom was. The northern kingdom contained 10 of the tribes. Technically, I guess the southern kingdom actually, territory-wise, contained 3 tribes, because Simeon was inside the tribe of Judah. But those people moved out. Those who didn't want to serve God moved to the north, and many people in the north moved to the south. So really, you had still 12 tribes in the south and 12 tribes in the north, if you to get technical. We tend to think of counties when we think of tribes, but there's actually people, not just a territory. Jotham actually was considered a good king compared to the other kings. His son Ahaz would be one of the wicked kings, and then Ahaz's son Hezekiah would be one of the good kings. So a lot of it was back and forth between these rulers here.
Is this the same Jew that married Jezebel?
No.
Oh.
No. That's Ahab.
Ahab.
Yeah, Ahab married Jezebel.
Okay.
This is Ahaz. Ahab was the northern king too. Ahaz is southern king. Jotham reigned during the ministries of Isaiah, Hosea, Amos, and Micah. And apparently he benefited greatly from these prophets. The books of the Bible really are not laid out in the best order. But remember, the books of the Bible are not, God did not arrange the books of the Bible for us. Man organized them for us. And that's fine. Once we have a standard, we need to stick with that standard. We can't change them. So I don't have a problem with that, but it's just, sometimes it can be confusing as to which book comes first. Especially with what we call the minor prophets, with Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, and Zechariah, and Malachi at the end. These minor prophets, I don't really even like the name minor prophet, to be honest with you, because minor to me sounds like it's less than. You had major prophets, and then minor prophets. Major was good, minor was not as good.
Well, why did they do that? Is it because they didn't write as much?
That's exactly why.
Oh, so they are minor because they didn't write as much?
Minor because of content. Yeah.
But not their knowledge.
Right, not their knowledge or their ministry.
Right.
Just as equally important.
Yeah.
The major prophets are Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. They're fairly large books. And Jeremiah, of course, wrote 2 books, the book of Jeremiah and also the book of Lamentations. So, for whatever reason. But then, with Hosea, Joel, Amos, and Obadiah, and Jonah, Hosea and Amos were around 650 6:50, 6:30, remind myself of that, 7:50. Whereas Obadiah, which is a minor prophet, actually happened a couple hundred years before that, or 100 years before those. So the order, they're just not in date in order by chronology. So it can be very, very confusing. And that again goes to help us to understand it's so important that we really study and make sure what we're studying is in proper context. Because if you study a book on prophecy and you're trying to apply that to yourself, you'll get really confused. So you need to know it's a prophetic book, like the book of Acts. In order to understand the book of Acts properly, you need to know that that's a historic book. It told what happened, not necessarily good or bad. It just, this is a matter of fact, this is what happened. And so we don't get our doctrine directly from the book of Acts. We get our doctrines from the epistles, or even the book of Revelation, there's doctrine from that. But again, going back, it's like Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5 died because they lied to the Holy Spirit. That doesn't happen that often today. It could happen. And there have been people, I believe, lied to God that God took home. But to be honest with you, if everybody was put to death that lied, y'all would need a teacher because I wouldn't be here. But you really wouldn't need one because you wouldn't be here either.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Part of his reign as king, he rebuilt the upper gate of the temple and fortified Jerusalem, built forts and towers. Remember, there's a fine line in building up the military and not trusting God. Sometimes kings built up the military because they did not trust God. Sometimes people built up the military because they still trusted God. And, it's a wise thing. You can truly trust God, but if you go home and you're by yourself and there's people walking around the neighborhood, do you lock your doors? Yeah, and it'd be a proper thing to do, right? Because even though you trust God, God still expects for us to use common sense. And so, nothing wrong with him building towers and forts in and of themselves. Again, if that's what he trusted in, remember the horses. If a king trusted horses, he was actually trusting his military over God, and God does not want us to do that. He had a couple of wars here. Rezin, who was the king of the Arameans, and Pekah, who was one of the kings of Israel, one of the last kings of Israel. He also had victory over the Ammonites. It says, in those days the Lord began to send against Judah Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah. And you notice in that verse who instigated the war.
Was it the Lord?
Yeah, the Lord.
Okay.
In those days, the Lord began to sin against Judah. So, as believers, it doesn't mean we'll be relieved of all of our problems.
And that's the southern king. Judah.
Judah's the southern kingdom. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
And so, southern kingdom. So, Jotham is the king at the south at this time. So, once you get saved, all your problems won't just go away. In fact, sometimes there's new ones that arise. Friendships that you once had that you don't have anymore because they don't want to hang around you. Be all kinds of problems. And there are going to be tests in your life. And that's exactly what God here is testing Judah. You want to trust your forts and towers that you made, you want to trust me. And of course, Jotham did what God wanted to do. And God allowed the northern kingdom and and Syria to attack Jotham in the south, but God gave him victory. He fought also with the king of the Ammonites and prevailed against them. And the children of Ammon gave him the same year 100 talents of silver and 10,000 measures of wheat and 10,000 of barley. So much did the children of Ammon pay to him both the second year and the third year. So, which is very common in those days for the enemy to pay tribute to the other kingdom. And that's what happened here. So, God allowed him.
You know, Dr. K, I've been reading the book of Joshua. You know how you go back and read,
Mhm.
and I never realized that it was so much fighting
Oh yeah,
in Joshua.
yeah. Most of the book of Joshua is
Just
wars.
fighting at war.
Yep. Then Ahaz, the 12th ruler of the south. He had reigned with his father for 4 years, I mentioned a while ago, but the sole reign was 16 years. Let me back up one thing for a second, make sure I got this right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have it right. This should be 4 years.
4.
Yeah, one,
Okay.
this one, yeah.
4. Okay.
It's, you know, these are not full years sometimes. It's like 3.5, so we average up or average down kind of thing. Yeah, 731, 732. You can actually change that 732 there. Because 32, 33, 34, 35 is 4 years.
With his father, correct,
Yeah.
with his father. And that should be 730 what?
2.
732.
And then 16 years as sole reign as king. This is, as we'll see here, maybe not today, but Ahaz was the king that God gave the prophecy of the virgin birth to, in spite of Ahaz. Even though Ahaz was a wicked man, God sent Isaiah to tell him, 7:14, behold, a virgin shall conceive. A sign was given to Ahaz concerning that. I always thought that to be strange.
Me too. That's what
Yeah,
I said. I was like,
Because of all the kings to give that prophecy to, you
Why?
think,
Why him?
yeah, why him?
Yeah.
You think it'd be David or maybe, or, you know, Hezekiah even. But the thing about it is Ahaz didn't want the sign. He told God to keep his sign, I don't want it. So ruled for 20 years as king. That's actually the same thing as on the prior screen. I meant to delete one of these here. 16 years. But the graph is there in 16 verse, chapter 16, verse 2. Remember, his father was a good king. He's not. A lot of reasons can be given for that. It might be because it's very likely that Jotham did not have anything at all to do with raising his son, as was the case with most of the kings. They didn't have any interaction with their own children because they were king and they had people to take care of their kids. Watching some TV, some actors, I don't know who it was now, we're talking about how hard it was to raise children. He said, the great struggle. And they started talking about her nannies and the tutors that come in and the nannies that she had. And I'm thinking, you know, that's not that hard to raise your kid if you hire somebody else to do it. Yeah.
But it's been a lot of mistrust and all this stuff with the nannies, the,
Oh, yeah.
the husbands, and
Yeah.
see, I wouldn't hire a nanny that looked better than me. That's number one. It would be a big fat woman.
Oh my goodness.
She would be so big. Oh.
His wickedness here Scripture tells us he worshipped idols under every spreading tree or places of false worship, even on every street corner in Jerusalem. Show how prevalent his idolatry was. In fact, 2 Kings 16:3 even tells us that he offered up his own son as a burnt sacrifice.
Mm.
Molech, or Milcom, was the god, so-called god, that they would offer up burnt sacrifices to. Then looking at Ahaz with the prophet Isaiah, the most prominent prophet in Ahaz's life. Tells us-
The book of Isaiah, is it true that it was written by two different people? It was,
No, there, it's a false view of it, Deuteronomy,
Okay.
Isaiah,
okay,
but there's no evidence whatsoever of
evidence,
that.
okay.
The book of Isaiah is kind of it's a unique book. Remember, the chapter divisions and the verse divisions were not given to us in the original manuscript. They were later added on. It is interesting, though, to note that the book of Isaiah has how many chapters?
66,
66, which,
like
like
the
the
Bible.
I think the Bible has 66 books in it.
Mhm.
And the first 39 books of Isaiah are talking about basically life in the Old Testament. Chapter 40 through 66 talks about the future. Well, it's like the Bible, the Old Testament has 39 books in it. The New Testament has 27, so that divides out like that too. And chapter 40 begins with the prophecy of what man?
Jesus.
No, the one who came right before him.
Oh, John the Baptist.
John the Baptist, the forerunner. And so it is kind of interesting how God allowed that to be like that for us. I'm not saying that whoever organized the books were inspired by God, but God may have led them to a certain extent as well.
I've heard people call it a mini Bible, and
Right.
I never understood, but now
Yeah,
as
that's
I
basically
study
the
the
reason.
book, I see why.
Because it does start with John the Baptist, then it goes into the ministry of Jesus. You know, so Isaiah 53, 45. Here in Isaiah 7 through 14, very familiar passage to you, at least part of it is. Came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, Pekah the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. And was told told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim, or Syria has joined up with Ephraim. Ephraim, remember, is the capital of the north, and so sometimes the northern kingdom is referred to as Ephraim, sometimes as Samaria. Syria and the northern kingdom, or Ephraim, has joined up together, and his heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. Then said the Lord unto Isaiah, Go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-Jashub thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool, in the highway of the fuller's field, and say unto him, Take heed, and be quiet, fear not, neither be faint-hearted, for the two tails of these smoking firebrands, for the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria, and of the son of Remaliah. Because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee. So God sent Isaiah, the prophet, and Shear-Jashub, his son, go to Ahaz and say, you don't have anything to worry about. The northern kingdom's coming against you, Syria's coming against you, But don't worry about it, because God's going to allow you to be victorious. Let's go up against Judah and vex it, and let us make a breach therein for us, and set a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabiel. So the northern kingdom and Syria said, we're going to not only defeat you, but we're going to put a new king over to you altogether. So Ahaz, you're in big trouble. Thus saith Lord God, no, it's not going to work. The northern kingdom, Syria, they won't stand. What they try to do is not going to work out. Now it shall come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. And with 65 years, or 65 years, shall Ephraim be broken. And that's what happened 65 years later. In 722 is when the northern kingdom went in captivity. That it be not a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. So God says, just trust me. If you don't trust me, you won't be established. If you trust me, I will not let these enemies have victory of you. In spite of the fact that Ahaz is a wicked king. But God is not really saving Judah because of Ahaz. He's saving Judah because there's still prophecy left that needs to be fulfilled. Moreover, the Lord spake unto Ahaz, saying, ask the sign of the Lord thy God. Ask it is either in the depth or in the height above. So basically God says, Isaiah said, listen, God's going to protect you. And Ahaz, to prove it, just ask God for a sign. Whatever it is you want to ask him. Whatever sign you ask for, God will give you that sign to prove to you that he's going to give you protection. And what's Ahaz saying? I don't want your sign. Oh. Don't give me your sign. I don't take your sign. He said, I will not ask. Neither will I test or tempt the Lord. And he said, hear ye now, O house of David. Is it a small thing for you to weary men? But will you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Now Ahaz would not live long enough to see the sign, obviously. It took 700 years later plus for the sign to come to fulfillment. But the fact is, what an arrogant man. I mean, he's scared. And God says, don't worry, I'll protect you. And plus I'll give you a sign. I mean, Ahaz could ask, well, give me Egypt. Because he said anything you wanted, I'll do it. But he says, I don't want your son.
He didn't know what he was saying.
No.
Oh.
Well, the war did take place as God predicted. Syria, northern kingdom, Israel, went against Ahaz. And as I said, before on that prior screen, but on this one, any sign he wanted. Because God was going to protect Judah. In spite of Ahaz. Not because of, but in spite of. All right, if you think, take a break.